Good evening, Shortcuts. This is video 2 for the price list that will go out this Wednesday, January 8th, 2025 at 9 p.m. Sydney time. If you would like to be on the playlist, drop me an email, on the price list, drop me an email, shortcutsrecordsaus@gmail.com. For those of you who maybe didn't watch the classic rock video, a couple of plugs. I sent out a 2025 sale list at 6 p.m. on Saturday. I know an unusual time for me to send an email. I didn't get many responses, even though there are a lot of very good and very cheap records on the list. So if you haven't checked your email, go back and do so. And the other thing I'm going to plug is the culmination of my year-long project to listen to as many different presses of Dark Side of the Moon as I could. That video went up yesterday. This is the genre list for this price list that will go out on Wednesday, the 8th. This has got reggae, soundtracks, big band, jazz, blues, soul, and maybe a little bit of funk as well. I can't remember. Let's get into it. It was really difficult to choose the lead-off record because there are some very famous records in this list, but a couple of them have been lead-offs on previous lists, so I'm not going to do those again. I'm going to choose something else. I'm going to kick off with 3 soundtracks today, and this, I think, is arguably, until the soundtrack to Reservoir Dogs, the most influential movie soundtrack that wasn't a score. I'm talking about a soundtrack. I'm talking about songs written and recorded for or included by the maker of the movie for a reason. I'm talking about The Harder They Come, ostensibly by Jimmy Cliff in The Harder They Come, the original soundtrack. But listen to this. You get Jimmy Cliff, Scotty, the Melodians, the Maytals, the Slickers, Desmond Decker. You get 2 killer Maytals tunes, including the all-time classic Pressure Drop, which has to be one of the greatest songs in musical history. And you get Sweet and Dandy, which is amazing as well. I love the Maytals, as you know. You get multiple Jimmy Cliff masterpieces, including the title track, The Harder They Come. You can get it if you really want it. The Rivers of Babylon by the Melodians, Draw Your Breaks. I tell you, it's just great. Now, why is this? You know, I think maybe reggae may have been pigeonholed if it wasn't for movies like this and soundtracks like this, where people could dip into songs that had been recorded, you know, in some cases 7, 8, 9 years before this soundtrack was released, which I think was like 72 or 73. What a great sleeve as well. Any love of reggae whatsoever, you gotta have a good copy of this record. It's so much fun to listen to. The Harder They Come, the original soundtrack featuring Jimmy Cliff, the Maytals, the Melodians, Scotty, and more. All right. I have a soft spot for Henry Mancini's Pink Panther soundtracks. They are so much fun. The genres are all over the shop. You can have bar jazz followed by lush exotica, followed by a little guitar motif, followed by a classical burst. It's Henry Mancini, or Mancini, whatever, I'm not sure, was undoubtedly a legend. a genius. There's no question in my mind. Every one of the Pink Panther movies, that incredible theme, he created a new variation. And I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag on what the variation in this one, other than to say I laughed out loud. It's so good. It's so good. These soundtracks are so underrated. I love the back sleeve as well with Peter Sellers. This one also features a song by Tom Jones, which was nominated that year for an Oscar. I don't think it won, though. I'm going to have to go back and double check. The Pink Panther Strikes Again, Henry Mancini. And now the third in my little triptych of movie soundtracks. This is one that's been on my shelf for many years, and I just hadn't reached for it until maybe 7 or 8 days before Christmas. And I played it, and I loved it, and I left a note with the guys in Shinjuku saying, if you find another copy, can you please send? And it is this. It is the soundtrack to the incredible folly that was Francis Ford Coppola's The Cotton Club. It's a movie well worth seeing. Every Francis Ford Coppola movie is seeing, but this one is particularly ambitious, particularly flawed. And I think the flaws are probably what has kept it in the conscience of moviegoers in America in particular, because it celebrates an era of music. And that era is effectively the Duke Ellington Band. And they brought together an immense number of musicians to recreate that Duke Ellington style. The movie featured an absolutely gorgeous Diane Lane, Robert Evans production. But this soundtrack has an interesting coda, because you have the big band kind of Grammy nominated. I don't know if it won the Grammy. I'm going to have to figure it out. I can't remember. But the Duke Ellington stuff is great. And then at the end of side 2, you get this coda of 3 or 4 John Barry tracks that are incredibly beautiful. And so this thing kind of hits on all sorts of levels. It's very unusual. I don't have very many records like it. The sound quality is outrageous. I mean, really. I really like the inner. The inner's got some beautiful scenes from the movie. It's a really interesting one. And so, yeah, I'm fairly sure someone out there will love this as much as I do. The Cotton Club, by many musicians, and a little coda by John Barry. Now, I mentioned there were 2 shortcuts classics. The issue with the fact that these 2 records aren't quite at shortcuts royalty status is because they're so hard to find, particularly the first presses, which these 2 are. It's Herbie Hancock's Headhunters and Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. 2 incredible Japanese presses. I'm going to see if I can get them both level. There you go. Herbie Hancock's Headhunters was for a while the biggest selling jazz album of all time, although arguably it's as much a funk album as a jazz album. The version of Watermelon Man on here is as funky as it goes. The band are outrageously competent. Everything about this record is iconic. The sleeve, the opening 30 seconds, the dense, difficult moments. It is not an easy listen, but it is a compelling listen every single time. And the Japanese first press of What's Going On continues to be in my top 10 presses of all time. It's the quality of the vinyl, that Tamla Motown production, that social conscience, that absolute mastery of his voice and his instrument and his intellect. Yeah, What's Going On? It's pretty special. Okay, I've got a couple of jazz records and blues. I'm going to talk a little bit about this. Miles Davis has been, without any question, there's kind of two rabbit holes I dove down in 2024. Actually, I'm going to call it three. One was my self-imposed project around Dark Side of the Moon. But the second was an immersion in this Japanese jazz label from the early 70s into the late 70s as well, called Three Blind Mice, more of which to come in subsequent weeks. And the third obsession was Miles Davis. I just really did not dive into Miles Davis until last year. And this record was a delightful discovery. I'd never heard of it until maybe August, September time. I managed to find another copy. It's still in its shrink wrap. It's got the Swing Journal seal of approval. For those of you who don't know what that means, Swing Journal was the premier kind of jazz and blues magazine in Japan, and it would give a seal of approval to those records that it considered part of the canon. This Miles 1958 kind of says what it means. It's music that Miles recorded in 1958. Those of you who know your stuff might know that A Kind of Blue was recorded in 1958, and this record has the same lineup as Kind of Blue. Miles Davis, John Coltrane, John Cannonball Adderley, Bill Evans, Red Garland, Philly Joe Jones. And this is the first recordings that Bill Evans ever made with Miles Davis. And it is, and it's controversial, as good as Kind of Blue. You've got On Green, Dolphin Street, Fran Dance, Stella by Starlight. The John Coltrane tenor sax solo in Stella by Starlight is outrageous. It is outrageous. It is just mesmerizing. And then on side two, you get a little bit of kind of a different scene. You get Love for Sale and Little Melanie. This is, I think, a hidden gem. And so, and this copy is perfect. There's a little dip in sound quality in some of the tracks as well, but I think that's to do with the tapes than anything else. But yeah, I love it. Miles 1958. All right, this one's a little bit different. Nukes Time. Sonny Rollins. Again, oh my gosh. I'll pick that up later. Oh, maybe I'll do it now. This is the inner for this BST series. You've got Sonny Rollins, Wynton Kelly, Doug Watkins, and again, Philly Joe Jones on drums. This is one of the more accessible Sonny Rollins records. And I think a lot of that's because it features Wynton Kelly, who's so beautiful to listen to, so playful. If you like your sax, Sonny on Nukes Time. I mean, I think it's in the debate for his greatest record. I am not and never will be the aficionado on Sonny Rollins. There's probably a few in the club, certainly Ivan, who knows way more than me. I'll be very interested in his view as to where Nuke's time sits. And that is a pristine Japanese Blue Note press. Okay, I got two of my favorite blues guitarists of all time right here. Fenton Robinson, the king of mellow blues. A beautiful velvety voice as well. The Getaway, kind of early Fenton, absolutely love it. One of my favorite blues records. This, the cornerstone of Chicago electric guitar blues. You have Magic Sam, the ill-fated and not long for this world Magic Sam on vocals and guitar. But crucially, also on guitar, Mighty Joe Young. Those two together make some balls-out blues noise. Stockholm Slim on piano and other kind of Chicago blues greats. His voice and guitar distorts so often because he's playing it so loud. This is one of the cornerstone kind of how do you get to Hendrix? You get there via people like Magic Sam. If you don't know that album, give the first track a go, play it as loud as possible. If you don't love it, check your pulse. Okay, I've got a few soul records to go, and I am going to finish on something I worked out on Christmas Eve. The biggest selling record in the history of Shortcuts is currently a tie. It is Michael Jackson's Thriller and the last record in his bundle, and I suspect by the end of Wednesday, this record will move one ahead of Thriller. The immortal Otis Redding, released posthumously, an absolutely beautiful record. What a tragedy. What a loss. What a posthumous album. Maybe one of the best posthumous albums ever. Give it a listen if you don't know it. This is a really nice copy with Obi. All right. This has got to be one of the great musical compendiums. Stevie Wonder's original Musicarium 1 with Obi. I always delight in just reading through the track list. Superstition, Living for the City, Frontlines, Superwoman, For Your Love, Sunshine of My Life, Sir Duke, Higher Ground, I Wish, Isn't She Lovely? And it just goes on and on and on. Stevie Wonder's original Musicarium. All right, now this next record is tied with Thriller, highest selling Shortcuts record of all time, and it is the Otis Redding, Best of Otis Redding Japanese Shrine recording. For those of you who don't know what that is, the Japanese worshipped Otis. Immortal, that was just a couple of records ago, was a massive hit in Japan. This was the compilation that they released after his passing. I call it a shrine record because literally it is like a shrine to Otis Redding. It has everything that he did pressed on vinyl of the highest quality. They absolutely nailed it. I love the sleeve. I love everything about it. The best of Otis Redding. The biggest selling record in the history of this vinyl club. There you have it. The genre list. What a diverse list. I hope you find that enjoyable. Price list will go out 9 p.m. sharp on Wednesday. That's Sydney time. First come, first serve. Explore the records and get ready to reply quickly. I think some of these are going to go pretty sharpish, if history is any judge. Please leave a comment, but comments in particular. This engine loves them. Otherwise, I'm invisible. Any questions? Drop me a line. If you'd like to be on the price list, shortcutsrecords@aos@gmail.com. Just drop me a line. Bye.